Dwayne Johnson, an immortal force of wrestling and cinema. A legend not just in America, but across the world. He transformed the arrogance and explosive charisma of The Rock into a cultural storm, etching his name into history. From blockbuster hits like Fast 5, Jumanji, and Moana, he captured the hearts of millions and secured his place in global entertainment forever. He rose from a humble wrestling family, carrying nothing but $7 in his pocket, to become a monument of discipline, willpower, and strength. More than an athlete, more than an actor, he redefined what it meant to rise from nothing, writing the American dream in his own blood and sweat. With unmatched drive and commanding presence, he became a living emblem of resilience, proving that greatness can emerge even from shadows deep enough to break anyone else. For decades, he was more than an entertainer. He was the story itself. A man who turned scars into strength and never surrendered, even when life forced him to his knees. But behind the spotlight lay a battlefield of pain, the tragic death of a close friend in the ring, 4 knee surgeries, multiple operations on his back and abdomen, the collapse of a marriage once believed unshakable, and the haunting ache of a father-son wound that death left unresolved. Even his beloved mother's life once hung by a thread after illness and a near-fatal crash. Each blow cut deep, reminding the world that even giants bleed. Now, at 53, while millions still see a radiant smile and unmatched charisma, his body carries scars and his soul bears unspoken grief. The applause has never stopped, yet few dare to confront the shadows he has lived through. Shadows no empire of fame or fortune can erase. And before we continue, if his journey has ever lifted your spirit in a dark time or inspired you to rise again, pay tribute to this extraordinary soul with a like, because before the bright lights of Hollywood and the roar of arenas, there was only hardship. Picture a young boy returning home with his mother, only to find an eviction notice nailed to their front door. No shelter, no bed, no certainty, only silence and the weight of a mother's tears. That boy was Dwayne Douglas Johnson, the man the world would one day celebrate as The Rock. Born May 2, 1972 in Hayward, California, he was an only child carrying the weight of a family hardened by struggle. His father, Rocky Johnson, was a trailblazer, one of the first black champions in WWE. To the world, Rocky was a symbol of strength and charisma, a pioneer carving history. But behind the curtain, he was a man consumed by the road, leaving young Dwayne to grow up in the shadows of absence, sacrifice, and poverty. His father, Rocky Johnson, earned what little he could from a brutal sport that paid in applause but rarely in stability. Nights on the road turned into weeks, and the paychecks vanished as quickly as they came. At home, his mother, Ada Maivia, the daughter of the proud Samoan wrestling dynasty of High Chief Peter Maivia, carried the weight of survival. While Rocky fought opponents in the ring, Ada fought her own battles, cleaning houses, borrowing from relatives, and stretching every dollar to keep food on the table. The Johnsons lived like nomads. From New Zealand to Hawaii, from North Carolina to Connecticut, and finally Pennsylvania, they never stayed long enough to plant real roots. For young Dwayne, each move was like tearing the ground from beneath his feet. He was always the new kid, walking into classrooms filled with strange faces and whispers. Poverty followed him like a shadow, one that no amount of size or muscle could hide. Then came 1986. At just 14 years old, his world fractured. Years of absence had left his father a stranger in his own home. Arguments filled the walls until silence finally replaced love. The divorce shattered what little stability remained. That same year, Dwayne and his mother returned home to find an eviction notice nailed to their front door. Within days, their car was repossessed. In one cruel sweep, house, vehicle, security, and pride were gone. They had nothing, not even a bed to sleep in. That night, they leaned on the mercy of Ada's parents, carrying the unbearable weight of humiliation. "I was evicted at 14, Dwayne would later recall, and I'll never forget the look in my mom's eyes. In that moment, he swore to change their lives forever, but poverty leaves scars beyond empty pockets. For Dwayne, it bred anger. He was big for his age, towering in hallways, but instead of respect, it earned him suspicion and conflict. Expelled from 4 schools, he fought classmates, lashed out in rage, and drifted into the wrong crowd in Waikiki. By 16, he admitted, "I was arrested multiple times. I was angry, lost, and on the wrong path." At home, the battles continued. Arguments with his mother tore at both of them, each carrying wounds too heavy for words. He loved her deeply, yet every tear he saw in her eyes broke him in ways no fistfight ever could. And yet, even in the darkest nights, something unbreakable was forming. He saw his father's relentless discipline, even if their bond never fully healed. He saw his mother's sacrifice, her willingness to endure humiliation and hardship for his sake. These became his true inheritance, the legacy of survival. There was one night he would never forget, sitting with his mother after losing their home, staring out into the dark streets with nowhere to go. The world outside carried on, cars passing, lights glowing in distant windows, while he realized just how fragile life could be. He was 14, and life had already broken him. But those cracks became the very lines where resilience took root. Every eviction, every fight, every tear his mother shed, each one became fuel. From poverty and shame, a fire was born. From every wound, he carved the strength to rise. The boy once left homeless would one day be known to millions as the Rock. Yet deep inside, every triumph carried the shadow of that broken child, scarred but never defeated. He carried eviction notices in his memory the way other boys carried trophies. Every sprint, every lift, every tackle was not just a play. It was survival. At the University of Miami, football seemed like the ladder out of poverty, the dream that could redeem every night of hunger and every tear he had seen in his mother's eyes. In 1991, he stood on the sidelines as the Hurricanes won the national championship, the stadium erupting in glory. Yet his own dream was slipping away. Sharing the same position with Warren Sapp, a future NFL Hall of Famer, meant no matter how hard he fought, the spotlight would not be his. 4 years passed, most of them from the bench. His GPA dropped so low he nearly lost his scholarship. By 1995, he graduated not with an NFL contract, but with a broken promise to himself. With nowhere else to turn, he crossed into Canada, clinging to a fragile contract with the Calgary Stampeders. The pay was $250 a week, barely enough to breathe. He shared a cramped apartment with 2 other players, his bed nothing more than a stained mattress on the floor. Dinner was instant noodles night after night. Hunger gnawed at his ambition, but he still sent what little he had back home to his wife, Dani Garcia, believing love was worth more than comfort. But love could not warm cold walls, nor erase the humiliation of watching teammates move forward while he stood still. "I remember lying on that mattress wondering if this was all my life would ever be," he later admitted. Then came the moment that stripped everything bare. Cut from the team, his body battered and his back carrying injuries that would haunt him for years, he rode home with his father in silence. Somewhere along the ride, he opened his wallet. $7. That was it. $7 in my pocket, he recalled. Those $7 were not just money, they were a scar, a mirror of how completely life had broken him. No team, no future, no dream. But giving up was not in his blood. Wrestling was in his family's veins. His father, his grandfather, his uncles had all shed blood and sweat in the ring. So Dwayne turned to the only legacy left, asking his father to train him. In 1996, under the name Rocky Maivia, he entered the World Wrestling Federation, smiling under the weight of 2 great family names. But the crowd was merciless. They booed, they jeered, they chanted, "Die, Rocky, die." For a young man already scarred by failure, it was a humiliation deeper than any tackle on the field. Nights came when he thought about quitting, disappearing into obscurity, but rejection became his crucible. He shed the smiling mask and reinvented himself as The Rock, brash, arrogant, electrifying. "The fans didn't want me," he later said, "but I learned to own the hate and turn it into fuel." And so from boos came cheers. From humiliation came hysteria. From $7 came an empire. Stone by stone, scar by scar, the man once mocked was reborn into a force of nature. By the late 1990s, the boy who once stared at eviction notices had become the people's champion. His raised eyebrow could ignite an arena. His catchphrases echo by 2003 with The Rundown, and in 2004 with Walking Tall, Dwayne Johnson had proven his magnetism on the big screen. He refused to be boxed in. Brick by brick, he built a foundation Hollywood could no longer ignore. By the end of the 2000s, he was no longer a wrestler trying to act. He was Hollywood's most bankable star. Fast 5. In 2011, turned an aging franchise into a billion-dollar juggernaut. Jumanji. Welcome to the jungle. In 2017 brought laughter to millions, while Moana in 2016 gave him a voice etched into childhood memories worldwide. That same year, Forbes crowned him the highest paid actor alive. It felt surreal, he reflected. But I was still that kid with $7 in his pocket. From the outside, he seemed unstoppable. Wrestling glory, box office dominance, global fame. But at the summit, the air was thin. The lights were bright, sometimes blinding. Every tailored suit hid scars. Every cheer reminded him of the cost. Greatness wasn't free. It was bought with broken bones, lonely nights, and the fear that if the world stopped cheering tomorrow, he might once again be that boy with $7 and nowhere to sleep. Dwayne Johnson lived at the peak, but peaks are volcanic, glorious to behold, yet always burning, always threatening to erupt. The rock never cracked, but Dwayne Johnson carried the fractures of every fall, every doubt, every sacrifice. Still, he endured because for him there was no other way. Yet even at the height of triumph, shadows gathered. Storms never vanish. They only wait. It was May 23, 1999, Kansas City. Dwayne Johnson stood backstage, lacing his boots, preparing to electrify yet another arena. He was 27 at the height of his WWE fame. The crowd was thunderous, the lights blinding. And then, in the blink of an eye, triumph turned to tragedy. That night, his brother, Owen Hart, just 34 years old, was set for a dramatic entrance. Minutes earlier, he had been laughing backstage, his smile echoing through the locker room. No one knew those would be his final words. When Owen's harness failed, he plummeted 70 feet into the ring. The sound of impact sucked the life out of the arena. 20,000 fans froze. Some thought it was part of the show, but the silence that followed was louder than any roar. From behind the curtain, The Rock watched his friend motionless under the lights. Medics swarmed. Chest compressions. Urgent shouts. Johnson wanted to run, to shield him, to scream that this was no performance. But he couldn't. Wrestling's cruel paradox held him back. If he stepped into the ring, fans might think it was scripted. So he stood in the shadows, his chest caving in, as Owen slipped away. And then came the cruelest order of all. The show must go on. Minutes later, The Rock's music hit. The curtain lifted. He walked down that ramp with his heart shattering at every step. It was the hardest match I ever wrestled, he later admitted. Each cheer felt hollow. Each move felt like betrayal. The ring, once his stage of triumph, had become a coffin of dreams. Weeks passed, but the pain never faded. He replayed the moment endlessly. The laughter before the fall, the thud, the silence, the stretcher. What haunted him most was what he never got to say. "I love you, brother." That silence would weigh on him for decades. For the world, Owen's death was a shocking tragedy. For Johnson, it was a wound carved into his soul, a reminder that even giants cannot escape grief. The boy with $7 had grown into the people's champion, but that night proved that even champions bleed, and even legends mourn. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought not in the ring, but in silence. With tears no one sees.